Hey, my name's General William Tecumseh Sherman, and the date's March 16th, 2020. It's about 9 o'clock p.m. I live in New Hampshire, and we're in the midst, really the early stages of the COVID-19 breakout here in the United States. And I started thinking to myself, you know, there's a ton of information that's out there, and I spend a good chunk of my day sort of scanning the news, scanning Twitter, social media, various news sources to try to make some sense and try to read through all the nonsense that's out there. And I'm not a doctor, not a statistician, maybe not particularly qualified for this, but I think it made a little bit of sense to me to start to put together a project, sort of like a working journal of the news and current events and sort of general reaction in the world to the news that we're hearing on a daily basis. So, I start to think about some of the perilous or confusing times in the past. Hey, what was it like in the United States during World War II or during the Great Depression, or even more recently during the oil embargo, right? And of course, you can go back and read newspapers and kind of see what was going on, or read some literature from the time period. But what you can't really do a good job of is start to understand on a daily, day-to-day perspective what's kind of going on in the life of people. What are they being exposed to? What's their general reaction? So the idea of my project here, and I say it's a project, it's really more of just a living journal. I hope to update it on a daily basis, is really just to document, hey, what happened today, what's sort of the news that we got. Let's take a look at a couple of different news sources and how are people then reacting on social media. Of course, it's not going to be a perfect sample from a social media standpoint. You're going to have my network, which I will say is a network of folks I don't personally know. They probably are fairly similar to me from a demographic perspective, but I've found a number of different sources over the last couple of months that I tend to trust their data and to trust their analysis. We'll spend a lot of time on those guys. So anyways, that's what I'm doing here. Maybe I'll get some views, maybe I won't. Don't really care. This is a little bit of a personal project, and maybe somebody at some point in time will see some value in this. And, hey, if it's one person, then that's pretty cool. So really start off here, CNN, the old cable news network, first place to go to, first thing. First analysis is nothing will be the same for a while, and that has never felt more true. To kind of go back a few days here, it's been an extremely turbulent, I'd say 4 or 5 days. Things have been changing extremely rapidly. I think it was last Thursday where it was really the beginning of the mass cancellations and closures that we started to see, really starting with the NBA after a player tested positive. Then the NHL followed suit, and MLB decided to push back the start of their season, and then it was just one after another. All the major sports leagues started to cancel their seasons or postpone their seasons indefinitely. On Friday, we got the announcement that here in New Hampshire that another school within our district would be closing for 3 weeks. The school that my children attend did not make the same decision. They did have an emergency school board meeting on Friday. They determined that school would continue, at least for the time being, until they saw more reason to close schools. Well, by Sunday, so that would be yesterday, March 15th, in the morning, maybe it was even late Saturday night, the 14th, we got an email from the superintendent that said, hey, we've done some additional analysis. We're going to go ahead and close schools for 3 weeks, which I think realistically we're all just seeing that as a 3-week wait and see. I don't really anticipate that school's going to start back up for the remainder of the year, but we'll see what happens. We're just taking it 3 weeks at a time here. I guess that's sort of the standard that the federal government has set. 3-week periods, reevaluate things. That's how they're laying out closures and a lot of the decisions that they're making. So that's kind of the background here that leads us up to today. There's been some massive lockdowns across the country. Boston this morning made some notifications or made the decision that they're going to close restaurants. And here, let's just jump on WCVB.com. Kind of get some local Boston sort of stuff here. Massachusetts 33 additional coronavirus cases. Let's see. Nothing popping up here, so let's just take a look at the breaking news. We'll kind of walk it back a little bit and start to take a look. So we've got confirmed and presumptive cases, mostly concentrated in Middlesex County. That came from a breakout that was purported to have happened at a Biogen conference at the Marriott Long Wharf in Boston, and that spread rapidly throughout the rest of the state. I'm sure you know there's been a lack of good testing, so confirmed cases pretty much assume those numbers are extremely low. Number of quarantined, I mean, look at how much that's jumped up here. 719 to 1,000 yesterday. We do have some folks coming out of quarantine, so that's certainly a good thing, but not certainly at the same rate. So got more going in than coming out. Definitely not a good factor there as we head in. Hospitalization, this is kind of interesting to me when you start to look at this from a global perspective. So sort of the number that's been thrown around and was presented to the U.S. via Italy was, hey, expect 10% of your cases ultimately to require hospitalization. So I've been following this fairly closely, and it seems, although I'd like to get some additional clarification here on what under investigation really means. I assume that's presumptive positives, but I'm not 100% sure. But if you're looking at just not hospitalized versus hospitalized numbers, we're tracking pretty close to that 10% requiring hospitalization, which is going to be a challenge as this thing expands and more cases are identified here. Number of patients tested, I mean, this is just abysmal from a statewide perspective. It's, I'll give them some credit. It's rapidly getting better. I say rapidly, but, hey, we tested what from the 15th to the 16th, we went from 969 to 1092, so just over 100 people. Yeah, that's not a good situation. Cool. So yeah, a couple other things in Massachusetts here. Initially, Governor Baker came out and banned gatherings of over 25 people, ordered school closures, restaurants shut down to takeout only. Marty Walsh shortly thereafter pretty much said, hey, no more restaurants at all. So I don't know. This is kind of a crazy fluid situation here in Massachusetts and in Boston. So now more from a national perspective, we'll take a look at some coronavirus live updates. Some of these we'll see live, as I'll see for the first time here because this is evolving so rapidly. But Colombia here is closing their borders. Los Angeles stopped issuing parking tickets. I'm not going to read all of these. WWE, so that's interesting. A lot of sporting organizations have completely canceled. Looks like WrestleMania 36 is going on just in an empty arena. I think that's kind of a good thing personally. I think it's, people can use some entertainment right now. I've got no issue with that. Grocery vouchers, UFC, there you go, postponing next 3 events. They had been sort of slow to the game. Dana White has. Minnesota's closing bars. Yeah, that's another thing. So we're in the middle of primaries. Arizona's going on as planned, I believe, and we'll get there. There's been Arkansas and another state have postponed their primaries until further notice. Regal cinemas are closing. Tom Hanks has left the hospital. That's a good thing. Some positivity there. Georgia's closing public schools. NASCAR's postponing races. Inmates are being released early due to coronavirus concerns. That's fun. Saturday Night Live suspends production. A lot of that. A lot of entertainment industry closing down. All schools ordered to close by Wednesday, the government said. So that's sort of an interesting development over the weekend. It was announced that all New York schools would be closing effective Tuesday, so tomorrow, which gave everybody one extra day. Obviously, there's a lot of logistics there to clean up. That's a large school system, obviously, with over 1 million students. So a lot of logistics that need to be worked out. McDonald's closing seating areas. We've seen that in a few places. Starbucks, some Dunkin' Donuts have done the same sort of thing. Kentucky's closing bars and restaurants. Interesting. We've got another actor here, Game of Thrones actor, tested positive. Airports want some money in the UK. SoulCycle's closing. Hospital masks, so they're starting to ration hospital mask delivery for healthcare workers in France. We saw that happen in Italy and, of course, in China when this thing really kicked off. So not a surprise here, but certainly concerning. Children with COVID-19 show less severe symptoms than adults. That's been, as this has evolved, that's been sort of an interesting development. There's been no reported cases no reported fatalities of children, I think, under the age of 10 or maybe under the age of 16 or something. So this certainly has a mortality curve that is more favorable towards younger folks and certainly more dangerous towards the older people. So we're still learning about that and starting to see those issues come out, or those reports come out. New guidance from the WHO on pregnancies. Amazon, this is fascinating. People are afraid to go out. I've got a video I might try to share here towards the end of this. I was just at my local Market Basket here, grocery store. Look, that just showed all the empty shelves there. So retail, I think we're going to see some significant changes here, and things will probably never quite go back to the way they are from a retail and home delivery perspective. Louisiana closures, bars and clubs are closing by 10 on Monday. Takeout and delivery still allowed, effective until April 1st. So DC is starting to do some stuff, not super strong. This is the big one, and this actually, I think, is pretty close to come up. I mean, I think they've closed all restaurants except for takeout only as of now. So that's something to keep an eye on. Hoarding, we've seen a lot of folks going out and just mass buying, panic buying crazy stuff, and that's something I saw at my grocery store. People have panic bought all of the bottled water on the shelves except for, ironically, the smart water, the expensive water, and you can tell people are just hoarding it. And why that's interesting here is I live in New Hampshire, where the vast majority of folks are running well water, so I don't really understand that. But really get here into the big one. This is the first big one. Nearly 7 million San Francisco Bay Area residents ordered to shelter in place. So that's a lot of folks pretty much being shut down for the most part. And I'm going to take a look here in a couple of minutes at that article specifically, but it's sort of interesting. You see, and that sounds really, really severe, and it is, but you start to look at the details, and essentially they've required non-essential businesses to shut down. People can still go out. You can still go to the grocery store. They'll still be open. Gas stations will still be open. Pharmacies, drugstores will still be open. But that's really the first city to put those massive lockdown orders into effect, or at least the first large city. This is interesting. So President Trump held a press conference here today, and he alluded to the fact that we may not be through the worst of this until, or really through the bell curve of this until July or August, which, personally I think is probably a pretty conservative, optimistic time frame. Hopefully it's realistic. It seems like we are finally taking some action to close things down and ultimately flatten the curve, which has become a pretty big buzzword here in the last few days. But that's got some people rattled a little bit. Hey, we may not be done with this until August. The other big revelation out of that was, Trump had come out in the last couple of days. The CDC and the federal government have said to limit public exposure or gatherings to a maximum of 50 people. Today they reduced that number down to 10 people. Internationally, we got France shutting borders, banning family gatherings. We've seen some significant rises in their cases. Spain, France, Italy, really the hot centers of the virus right now, it seems. UK's closing in. They're a few days behind on the curve, but they're kind of heading in the same direction right now. And the UK's in an interesting spot because they haven't taken really those early containment measures. Initially, the thought there was sort of a herd immunity approach, but it seems like maybe they're reconsidering that. We'll see if we can take a look at some articles about that. Stock market has been absolutely crazy today. It plunged. The Dow plunged 2,997 points. Its worst day since 1987, and this follows just a couple of days ago. God, these ads keep running, and I can hear them in my headphones. A couple days ago, we set the previous second worst day since 1987. So. It's ugly there for the stock market. Everybody's just terrified, and that's not just here. That's everybody. All the indices, all the global markets are just in absolute collapse and panic, and they're incredibly volatile. Another comment Trump made, considering. He said, Trump, in the press conference today, I guess in a meeting to the governors, in a teleconference, he said, hey, you guys should really try to purchase your own ventilators and respirators, hospital beds, if possible. Today in his address, he said that his intention there was that, hey, if you have better procurement processes that do not require the levels and the requirements that the federal government currently require, then go ahead and try to purchase your own devices and equipment. And I'm looking at this new headline. Trump says he's considering recommended quarantine for coronavirus hotspots. I think that's going to be coming out here pretty soon. They're going to start shutting stuff down pretty heavily and quarantining the major hotspots, specifically California, Washington. We get a pretty good outbreak here in Boston, and New York / New Jersey have really been the hotspots early on here in this breakout. Good news: we had the first vaccine trial, or the first participant in the trial given a dose. So, really early on in that process. Talk right now is 12 to 18 months. Of course, the federal government saying they're trying to cut red tape and all that to get that thing approved and certified and get that thing going. But I'll believe it when I see it. Mitt Romney proposes giving $1,000 to every American adult to offset, hey, there's a lot of folks out there with all these shutdowns. If you're an Uber driver, if you're working hourly in a lot of retail stores that are closing, we just saw some theaters closing. If you're, server at a restaurant, bartender, hospital, I almost said hospitals. They're no lack of demand there. But hotels, travel industry, that stuff's all pretty much shut down. So starting to see a little bit of a movement to provide some aid to folks who might need it in the coming future. Um, I think that's about enough on U.S. news here from CNN. I'll take a look at some global news from another source, but we can take a look at just their headlines here, see what's going on. China, of course, they were the first hit by it. They've reported that they've essentially recovered, and there's no active activity there. I don't personally believe it. I think they're not reporting it. Either way, they're going to take a significant economic hit. All of the globe's um, supply, demand, supply chains are out of whack. Everything's all screwed up here right now. So we'll see how that develops. We'll pop over to Fox News. It's been sort of an interesting left wing, right wing sort of debate. I started with CNN, left wing, looking at right wing now. The initial response from the right was that coronavirus concerns were really overblown, and that it's been a left wing conspiracy to end the presidency of Donald Trump. I mean, I think that they're coming around finally and starting to see that this is a significant issue. I mean, Trump's has been, to his credit, fairly strong in some respects. There's been a extreme lack of insight and guidance and some significant shortcomings from a federal government perspective. Those things include testing, quarantine measures, just really response. How are we reacting to this thing? Planning. China constructed an incredible amount of hospitals in a short term a couple of months ago, or maybe about a month ago now, and we in the West stood idly by. We didn't start to plan our testing procedures, quarantine procedures, and that's an unfortunate thing. So we've seen a big ramp up here, and the right wing side's getting more on board with, hey, there's a real issue here. So just a little bit of color there if you happen to be watching this in a number of years. Yeah, some more about virus compliance guidelines could morph into forced compliance if people don't sign on. I mean, I think we're going to start to see that. And we'll sort of look at that Twitter perspective here. And my goal is not to make this an hour-long video every day, but hopefully keep it to 20, 30 minutes. But seeing as this is the first one, maybe we'll spend an hour here today and then scale them back as we go forward and really focus more on just the new developments. So yeah, I think we're going to see some more talk about forced compliance. We'll take a look at guidelines that were released by the White House. Is this a video? That's unfortunate. 15 ways to spread the flow. I don't even know how to use this. Page 1 of 2. Let's see. It's a PDF document from the CDC. And I can't find their 15 ways. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what we're getting from the federal government is this sort of insights. Hey, here's 15 ways to slow the spread. Pop it open. It's a 2-page PDF with nothing. So it's frustrating. So that's pretty much useless. Lindsey Graham was recently exposed, South Carolina. I think he's still in quarantine. I think he tested negative. Maybe he's out of quarantine. Trump gave himself a 10 out of 10 on his coronavirus response. That's good for him, I guess. He's coming up for election. So, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else I really want to dive into here, but I will show you just the general homepage, going back to looking at this from a historical perspective, hey, there's a lot of folks still out there today saying it's the same as the seasonal flu. Everybody's freaking out for no reason. But we'll look at some numbers in a couple of minutes that show right now it looks like the death rates are closer to 4%, the mortality rate, whereas the seasonal flu is, what, 0.6, 0.06, something like that. So not even a comparison. Social distancing's caught on in the last few days. I think responsible people are really doing the best they can to stay at home, kind of shut themselves in, be responsible if you have to go out, not look at this, not come into super close contact with people. We have seen some stuff like this where we saw some of this in China, Singapore. People are just out there. I don't understand what's going through people's heads, but people are licking things and giving people intentionally the virus out there, which is just terrifying. So breaking news now here in New Hampshire, close to home. Let's see what we got going on. This is the first time I've seen this. So positive COVID-19 tests currently at 17. I do not think those numbers have been updated today. That'll come out in a couple of hours. Number of pending tests, 195, negative 355. So that's something. I don't know. They've done a pretty good job here in New Hampshire breaking down where people were, who they are. How do you find out? There's a fairly low patient count, so they can still sort of do that. This one, I think, or patient number 7. This is pretty fascinating. So HIPAA compliance, they can't tell us who this person is, where they work or anything like that, but initials announced on March 13th that somebody tested positive. Rockingham County woman has been at the Manchester Division of Motor Vehicles several days in March. Now, if you actually go back and look at that story, they give you the timeline of when that person was at the DMV, and it was the entire week, 8 to 4:30. So that person was not just at the DMV, that person was a DMV employee. And I recently saw they're starting to tie some of the newest cases to that employee, which is scary because clearly that's a place where there's a lot of close exposure to people, and there's not a whole lot of social distancing going on there. I was hoping, I'm sorry to bounce around here, but I was hoping I could find that news, but COVID-19. But yeah, that was a brand new report, breaking news. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, so here we got COVID-19 in New Hampshire. So patient number 1 and 2 were up in Grafton County. After that, it's pretty much been all Rockingham County. Some folks that have traveled to Europe, and I don't know. Well, I guess there has been some community transmission via the DMV worker and her people. Look at all this news coming out just in the last few days. It's crazy. Financial news. I mean, we saw some of this at CNN. The upcoming days, I'll dig deeper on some financial news, but big event here today. Dow dropped nearly 3,000 points. Let's see what the futures are doing. I mean, look at this. Look at this volatility here. So down 3,000 yesterday. Down futures are up 800 today. I mean, or for tomorrow. Just craziness. I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't have a lot of money except for what's in my 401k invested in the market, but I do have a couple of investments out there. I sold them last week. I'm going to wait. I think this thing's going to go down quite a bit from where it's at. I don't think we've seen the worst of it by a long shot. Hopefully I'm wrong, but let's take a look here in a couple of months. We're at March 16th. Hopefully I can reinvest some of that in a couple of months when things start to trend more consistently in the right direction. Um, Yeah, I was starting to talk about short-term aid to the travel industry. They're hurting bad, as is Boeing and the suppliers there to that industry. Of course, all orders are going to be on hold. I'm starting to see that personally at work. People just kind of taking the approach of, hey, let's just pause and wait and see what happens. So not a lot of forward movement. We're kind of waiting to see how this thing unrolls. So here's a little snapshot there. Looking at the most active. I'm not going to try to capture everything. If you want to go back and look at the data, that'll always be available. But hey, what are we seeing on a day in, day out basis? This is what this looks like here. Cool. So now I think we get into personally what I think's the most interesting thing to follow, and that's sort of the social phenomenon here, and really following the news, not from a news media perspective, but trying to look at some data and toward some influencers or some people who can start to make some sense of the data. Personally, I've been following COVID-19 since, I would say, the middle of January. So it was first identified in December. Really, you started to hear about it in early to mid January. I'm not going to go back through the whole timeline, but I was incredibly fascinated when you started to hear about coronavirus, and then you'd see some of the proactive measures that China was taking in Hubei and all the actions they were taking. I mean, they were building hospitals, they were disinfecting streets, you were seeing videos of proactive quarantining. They were quarantining, welding people into their apartments, just shutting things down, shutting the streets down. You couldn't leave. And you knew something funky was coming. It wasn't just a normal flu breakout, swine flu, any of the other ones that have come and gone, or even SARS from a number of years back, or MERS, or any of those other diseases. It just felt different. So I dove in deep, and I've really been watching and searching for anything that I can find, and I've really just found a couple of sources that I figured I'd snapshot here today, and that's BioBreakout, and I'm going to give these guys a shout out. I don't know, how realistic these folks are. BioBreakout claims to be an ER doctor, I believe. We can take a look at his Twitter profile here: physician, hospitalist, swing trader, biotech junkie. So I went back, kind of did a little bit of due diligence on this individual. I didn't go all the way back, but going back a couple of weeks, it's all financial information. I did find some early, I shouldn't say early, but not that long ago, this individual was sort of the mindset. Look at this. Where is the panic and hysteria about influenza? Already 16,000 deaths and counting in the USA this season compared to COVID, right? So we're kind of seeing, and this is what we've seen, saw a lot of here, people kind of waving off COVID and saying, hey, look, there's nothing to see here. This is no big deal. Look at the number of cases of COVID in the U.S. versus China as of late February. And, people were saying, hey, everybody's overreacting. Now you sort of move ahead here. Look at that. My hospital asked for physicians to form a response team. I volunteered. We'll let you know how it goes. First suspected case of COVID-19 at my hospital on March 8th. Test came back negative. So that's a good thing. I'm going to scroll up just a little bit here. A little bit on flattening the curve. This has been the last couple of days. There's been a big push about the flattening of the curve to help alleviate some of the pain that the hospitals are inevitably going to see in the upcoming months. I can't find the actual tweet, but here he retweeted a retweet of his own. So far, I've treated 5 confirmed cases of COVID-19, so that's March 14th. Currently have 14 suspected cases. I can tell you in 18 years of medical practice, I've never seen anything like this. And look at this pretty quickly. I'd like to ask you a sincere question. Don't take it the wrong way. Are you changing your mind about your previous tweets like this? Blah, blah, blah. I was wrong. This is not influenza. Yes, stay at home. We must flatten the curve or our healthcare system will be paralyzed. Again, I'm not going to go through everything. I'm a hospitalist. This has potential to paralyze our healthcare system if it's not mitigated. Social distancing is the only thing that can help at this point. He goes in some places to talk about, yeah, here you go. It's severe viral pneumonia. Problem is there's a flood of COVID-19 coming to the ER quickly, filling our hospital with them. So, I don't know. I don't know about a breakout. I don't know if they're a real person. I hope they are. They seem to check out all the data that I've seen. So, I follow them, but keep a skeptical eye to what they're putting out there. Trevor Bedford at TRVRB has done some great research here about genome sequencing of the virus. You can see here he's done some analysis on he and a team of researchers have done some analysis on the mutations of the virus, trying to identify the source of the virus. They've identified that there are a couple of sources. Most of them are from the initial sources or from one case that originated from a international traveler from from China that came back, and that spread out across to a number of different cases, specifically in Washington State. There was a cruise ship in San Diego. I think they ultimately docked at San Diego, but they had some additional breakouts. There's been another that ultimately came from another patient, so that is an unrelated introduction of the virus to the United States. My favorite follow right now is EV Defender. This individual has posted fantastic statistics and trending and data about the virus, and I'll pause on this one here because I think this is extremely concerning when you start to think about the data that we're seeing here. So, and I think people don't really realize how scary the virus is because they are leveraging Chinese data. And you can see here we've got the Chinese curve from Hubei province, from Wuhan. You can see they took extremely drastic draconian measures to try to mitigate the spread of this virus. I mentioned those a little bit earlier, things like welding people into their apartments, disinfecting the streets, complete quarantines, shutdowns. They built temporary hospitals. So if this curve really did flatten like this, that's why. The reality of that is we're not going to be able to take those sort of measures, thank God. I mean, I wouldn't want to live in a place where we're locking people in their homes from the outside and leaving them there. I mean, there were reports of people dead in apartments for extended periods of time. There were reports of people not getting food, people starving, so no thank you. I'd rather deal with the virus in other ways by other means. So at any rate, even if that is what their curve looked like, that's why it looks that way, and those are measures that we will not take in most parts of the world. So what that leads us to is a scenario where we're leveraging their data, their fatality rates, and the effectiveness, and this thing is so young. All of our data is really based on what we've seen out of China. And number one, we're assuming they're taking and reporting actual numbers. Number two, we're assuming that we're seeing obviously that they're doing things that we're not capable of doing. So at any rate, you can see there's pretty darn close to exponential growth here in the total global cases. That's a scary thing. Um, Certainly not official numbers here, but based on his data, estimated case fatality rate um, currently sitting at 3.85%. That is scary. Um, Worldwide cases 169,210. Here in the U.S., 3791. Italy right now is really, well, Europe. The WHO recently said is the epicenter of the outbreak right now. Italy specifically is the epicenter within Europe. They have reported, I think, 348 recent deaths today. That's a global record for the day, including anything that was ever reported out of China. This is what it looks like mapped up. BNO Newsroom at BNO Desk, another fantastic source. Just good news. If you want some quick hits in your timeline here about what's going on. That's a great follow. Let me see. There was something else I wanted to. I think I'm going to jump here actually and take a look at BNO Newsroom's news feed for the day. I don't know why I just scrolled all the way down. We can probably get some new updated news. So Venezuela's locking down nationwide. 1,350 inmates escaped from prisons in Brazil. That's exciting. So we're starting to see. I think we had some reports of early prison riots in Italy. So that's something to keep an eye on as this comes out. Honduras locking down Greenland. First case here on March 16th, 2020. Second biggest Dow. We've covered the Dows. Don't need to cover that. Bay Area on lockdown. We've covered that. France is postponing Sunday's local elections, so we're starting to see some political repercussions in terms of elections. Mentioned some primaries being postponed here in the United States, but internationally as well. Russia's denying entry to foreign visitors. Pennsylvania, so this is 7 hours ago, orders statewide close of all non-essential businesses. I'm going to do some digging into what that means here in a little bit, but that's pretty significant. Sudan has closed airports, ports, land crossings. CDC recommends that for the next 8 weeks, events with more than 50 people are canceled throughout the United States. So think about that. It's March, April, May. That brings us through the spring. We'll see. Hopefully 8 weeks is it. Doubt it though. Schools, bars, and gatherings in Boston closed. French government's preparing an order which requires people to stay at home to stop the spread of coronavirus. So that's just happening now here in France. California's urging 65 and older to isolate themselves at home. I know this sounds like I'm reading a lot of headlines, and if you're watching this today, probably not super valuable. I want you to keep this in mind that hopefully this is intended for people maybe 2 years from now, 5 years from now, who are looking back at really how this thing went down. So hopefully this is interesting. Illinois has joined Ohio in ordering the closures of bars and restaurants. Crazy. So this is a bad one. I mean, this is Italy right now has the worst breakout. Today, 3,590 new cases, 368 new deaths. That's a total of 1,809 dead, and the trend is just every day getting larger and larger. I mean, we've heard the initial reports out of Italy were to expect 10% hospitalization rate, and the current state in Italy right now, they are needing to start to decide how they are treating patients. They are prioritizing patients on things like underlying conditions and age. They don't have enough hospital beds. They don't have enough respirators, ventilators. They don't have enough hospital staff, and that's what we're afraid of here in the U.S. is how can we reduce that curve, reduce the total number of hospital patients so that we don't hopefully need to be in that situation. But it's terrifying. So the guidance out of Italy was, hey, expect 10% hospitalization, get on this as early as possible. They were kind of late to the game when it came to quarantining, when it came to locking people in town, when it came to shutting businesses down. They were pretty public about saying, hey, don't make the mistakes that we did. Get on it early. This is no joke. Starting to see the same out of France now. France, I saw a report yesterday on CNN, has reported that 50% of their hospitalized patients are under the age of 60, which sort of, I'll say, contradicts the general perception, I think, in the world. Right now, people are viewing this as a disease that is primarily going to affect older people, and people over the age of 70 was the initial number. I've always been skeptical of that because you've seen some doctors in China dying. You've seen reports of surgeons in Italy dying, and these are healthy people that are significantly under that age of 70. So I think right now, whether people know it or not, I think that this is significantly more dangerous for younger people than the general public tend to believe or want to believe. And maybe it's more dangerous than anybody really believes, and I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't know what the case is there. Maybe the government and governments across the world don't want panic, so they're trying to downplay the risk. I mean, I do think the risk is, of course, significantly higher for those with underlying health conditions or older people, but I don't think that we should be dismissive of the threat that it brings, even if we are young and healthy. I don't know how far back to go back here. I mean, I can get into a wormhole, but Trump was tested on, so he threw a presser on Friday, so that would be Friday, March 13th. And so, full story here. So, a couple of folks who visited his Mar-a-Lago resort tested positive, including an assistant, I believe, or somebody who works in the Brazilian administration and is close to the president of Brazil. Well, of course, the four of them had a meeting. The assistant that tested positive, the Brazilian president, and I'm sorry, I don't know his role, the president of Brazil, Trump, and somebody else was present at Mar-a-Lago. There were reports that the Brazilian president tested positive. They were then refuted and said, no, he came back negative. The assistant came back positive. Anyways, at this press conference, Trump was asked if he had been tested, and this was on Friday. He said no. Over the weekend, it came out that he did indeed have a test late Friday, and that test came back negative. So I don't know if they'd even tell us if he was positive, but there you go. That's when we're finding out about it. I don't know. That's BNO Desk, at BNO Desk. I highly recommend giving these guys a follow. Let's see if there's any new news here. Doesn't look like it. Cool. So I'll switch over and we'll just see. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing this, but let's see if we can get a snapshot here. Oh shit, so I just told you about breakout. Our hospital is under lockdown. Visitors banned. Only way in and out of hospital and ER. Nursing and med students sent home. Floors are eerily quiet, and our once packed ER is now deserted except for the sickest of patients. I'm going to go ahead and retweet that right now. Yeah, I'm not going to add a comment. I'm just going to retweet it. Let's just give it a retweet. Anxiety, worry, heavy anxiety here these days. Scary times. We got some good folks coming out. I don't know Fez. So just so you know, I am a Kirk Minahan Show Minifan. This is my Minifan account. Most all these folks are Minifans in the world, so that's who you're going to see here, as well as some news sources that I've followed. So we got Fez here reaching out. But Fez lives in Rhode Island. DM's open, so we do have some folks reaching out. Got some football news, that's good. All the other leagues are shut down. Like I said with WWE, it's sort of good to be a little bit distracted about some sports news. So, Kyle Van, thank you. So Kyle Van Noy is no longer a Patriot. That's unfortunate. That's too bad. I like that guy. That's funny. Look at that. All right, that's it. I'm not gonna dive anymore. Oh yeah, look at this. This is spring break, Florida. KFC's been a good advocate for trying to get people to self-quarantine, or I shouldn't say self-quarantine, but to practice social distancing. This is going on right now in Florida. Spring break. It's March. People aren't listening. Same thing was going on in New York City and Manhattan over the weekend. That's why there was kind of an outrage, and New York's been shut down. But this is the kind of bullshit that's going on, and this is what's going to cause us some issues. It's concerning. Let's see, I'm just going to go down here and see if we've got anything else. I don't know. Nobody wants to see my Twitter timeline. So last thing I'll touch on here, I do like to jump on, take a look at some BBC World News, and in upcoming days I'll be a little more organized here as I start to get into the swing of things. But Germany and France announcing lockdown. Germany's been very vocal in expressing the worst positive case scenario in of COVID-19. So it's been sort of, I don't know whether that's classic German or what, but Merkel came out, and this was probably a couple weeks ago, and said, hey, we have to be, of the mindset that 70% of our population will ultimately contract the disease and be prepared to deal with that. That caused a very sharp decline in the markets over there, and a lot of backlash. But maybe she was right. Who knows? Let's see. Richard to blame for climate change. We're still on climate change. To me, it sounds a little. Feels like this is. I don't know if climate change is going to be a big issue here after this is all said and done, with a 4% fatality rate. Hit coronavirus. Yeah, a lot of questions about people working from home. How do I do it? When do I make my own decisions? I'm probably going to read this. I can see my mental health being affected. Like I said, a lot of anxiety. The worst part of it right now is just not knowing. Don't know a lot about the disease. We don't know how governments are going to react. We don't know if we're going to be locked down tomorrow. We don't know if the stock market's going to rebound. We don't know, what this is going to do to the job market. It's like, I just want it to be in its peak, like ASAP. It's sort of just a long, slow crawl, just watching this thing unfold and just being inundated with data and information and kind of watching it here. So I'll probably read that after this. So that's it. Oh, you know what? I'm going to pause this real quick. I do want to show some videos here at my supermarket. So I'll be right back on. All right. So one last thing I figured I'd do. I jumped on my Twitter and I was like, hey, I should probably just show out because I've tweeted and retweeted a whole bunch of, at least what I think is sort of interesting insights here. So here's some math. This is scary math, and I hope these numbers aren't right. I responded to this 7 hours ago, but this person says 2158 people have now died, with an increase of 349 in the last 24 hours. Total number of cases 27,980. 11,000 hospitalized with symptoms, and 1,851 in the ICU. If those numbers are right, that amounts to 40% hospitalization, 6.6% ICU, and 36% home care. I mean, that's not anything like what we're being told, so I don't know. I'll probably follow up and do some digging on those numbers, but we'll see. You can see here, EV Defender. Got me giving people a hard time. Again, I tweeted this out. This is not getting enough coverage here in the United States, maybe anywhere. We're being told essentially that this is a disease that old people and people with underlying conditions need to be worried about, and young, healthy people do not need to be worried about. This tends to contradict that a little bit, huh? Let's see. So a report yesterday, there were a few of them from China. I was being a little bit of a wise ass, but there were some reports that COVID may harm male fertility. And that's why I made that comment a little while ago, that COVID may solve the global climate crisis, if there is one, but that could do it. Let's see. March 15th, yesterday, Federal Reserve makes an emergency interest rate cut to 0%. Man, it's early in this, and we're already running out of bullets here, so that is concerning. But Feds are buying bonds. This is concerning, obviously, from an economic perspective. Tend to agree with this tweet. Turns out a lot of people are okay with authoritarianism as long as they agree with the particular action being taken. We saw a lot of that this weekend where people said, hey, everybody, why are there people out and about? If everybody's not social, my demographic's not social distancing, why the heck should I? It should be all or nothing. There needs to be a mandate that everybody be locked down. So people pretty much calling and asking for a call down or for a lockdown, and just seen a lot about that. Just to show you how bad of a situation we're currently in from a testing perspective, and I'm sure there will be some analysis on this when this is all through. South Korea has tested 200,000 people for coronavirus, and they have pretty much leveled off the total number of cases. CDC has tested 77 people this week, yet the Utah Jazz, first player that tested positive, so there was a Utah Jazz player that tested positive. The entire team was tested, so the state of Oklahoma used 60% of their daily test capacity on testing players and staff from an NBA team. I don't know, but on the other hand, one of them did test positive, so all those people had direct contact. I don't know. There's me social distancing with my kids. Right here you go. Spain. Spain's on lockdown. 10 o'clock on the 14th, so Saturday, all the workers, or everybody on quarantine went in, and if I could share audio here, I would, but just gave the frontline workers a round of applause, and just a little bit of a moving moment there. Yeah, here's the initial announcement. Folks close to this is in my school district, but not my town. But yeah, that's it. And I'll show you just a couple of videos here from the grocery store and close it up. Here we go. Won't show them all. I mean, I think you see one, you see them all. But you know, here's the produce section here at the local market basket. Tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day. I was hoping to get some potatoes and carrots for St. Patrick's Day, but SOL on that. Who knows? Maybe we can find them tomorrow or at a different grocery store. Here's the bread aisle. I mean, some of this is panic buying. Some of this is smart. You know, hey, we gotta have some bread. I know I've kind of lived by trying to have 2 weeks of supplies, and I've told that to some of my friends and family members, hey, you should have at least 2 weeks, or, you know, probably not going to die or anything from this, you know, hopefully, but you should have 2 weeks. That's frozen foods. This is the frozen pizza section. I thought this was kind of funny. I mean, I guess it's good to have some pizza, but I don't know that that's the first thing I'd go after in a crisis. We did pick up a couple of them, but yeah, miscellaneous, just frozen stuff here. You know, people, of course, buying that, which doesn't perish. Here's the water aisle, like I said. We go well water up here, most of us, seeing just a massive run on bottled waters. I don't, you know, seems kind of crazy to me. And also, you can great indicator. You know, you live in New Hampshire when, you know, smart water is the only thing there. Nobody's taking the expensive stuff. It's all the Poland Springs and store brand stuff that's gone. Shows you too. That's a little bit of a luxury item, huh? Cleaners, you know, detergents. Still get your laundry detergent, but if you're looking for any sort of bleach sprays, cleaners, disinfectants kind of stuff, that's all sold out. I got on that, got a couple of bottles of it pretty early on, so nothing for us to worry about. Dairy, you know, decent shape, no 2%, none of the good stuff, but still got most of it. Deli's in good shape. Fish is alive and well. No shortage of fresh or frozen fish there at Market Basket. I believe, I hate to admit it, I don't do most of the grocery shopping, but I think this is sort of the hot dogs, sausage kind of section, pretty much all sold out there. I don't even know. I think this is some pork usually. You know, kind of your big, you know, your briskets. I ended up buying one of those corned beef briskets because tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day, like I said. You know, so this is kind of the level of panic buying we're seeing going on. I mean, I don't know how this will disrupt the supply chain and farming and all of that. We'll see as the days go on. But, you know, certainly it's something to keep an eye on. So I'll close out with that. I think that's enough for today. Like I said, we're at an hour and almost 5 minutes. So tomorrow will be shorter and more concise. And I think I'll just hit on what I learn between now and probably about the same time tomorrow before I go to bed. So get this uploaded and hope you find it valuable.